Call the meeting to order.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the record show that all board members are present, except for Eric Minks and Eric Strandberg. So there are no citizens' comments. We'll start with board member committee reports with Jim.
No, nothing, well, the 15th was policy, right? I didn't have any other committee meetings.
We didn't have policy either. Or did you have policy?
No, policy is the 15th, I guess, yeah.
Don?
No committee meetings this time.
I had agenda planning and the C general membership meeting, and Ben also attended there. Most of the discussion was about the upcoming legislative session and the governor's budget, and that's all I had. Deb?
I had agenda planning, and then I also listened in on the MSBA coffee and conversation on last Friday. Those are pretty interesting. They're only an hour, and so and anybody can just hop on. They send that Zoom link through that email I think everybody gets, and it's really interesting because whoever is on the Zoom, in the Zoom meeting, that's how they form the agenda. So board members just say, we're having this issue, or we're having this issue, and then everybody talks about it. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Is there a certain topic that tends to come up more often than others?
I mean, lately it's been surrounding COVID and staff shortages and staff burnout and, bus driver, all those kinds of things. Yeah.
Chad?
Nothing to report.
Okay, and Eric Minks has joined us. Eric? do you
Yes,
have
nothing
anything?
to report.
Okay. Student council, doesn't look like Dylan is here today, so we'll move on to the superintendent report.
I'll keep it short. We're working out some final work on a potential sale of our land. I'm hopefully meeting with our attorney tomorrow just to take a look at the legal descriptions of some of those parcels. Honestly, it's like a foreign language to me. So if any of you are experts at some of that, I would gladly take some of your guidance and just let me know if you do. So I think it's just a matter of kind of getting the legal description of exactly where the lines will be in terms of, the different property lines. And that's, of course, very important, but it's complex too, and not in my wheelhouse. So we'll get that going. We've had a good start of the school week. I guess put it into perspective anyways. One of our better starts of the school week with COVID, some of our lower numbers. We're hoping that this is a start of a trend with things kind of going downward. I think even looking back to a couple of months ago where they were projecting trends and things, we knew that we were going to go through a pretty difficult time, and then it would kind of taper off. I think that we're there. I mean, obviously I shouldn't have said that, but things are looking better, and attendance and those kinds of things are looking good too. Very excited with some of the work that's happening in curriculum design and curriculum development, and something I probably should bring in here in the next couple of months is a presentation to all of you just on the exciting work that's happening in the area of reading instruction in our district. There's a few different things. One of called the Science of Reading, and our teachers are having some significant successes in that. So we're excited about that. We're in Michelle's going to talk to you a lot about, you know, the revised budget for this year, and we're in starting stages for budgeting for next year. But of course, running parallel to the budget discussion is the course offerings and the staffing associated with all of those courses. So, you know, that's all happening at the different sites as well. And as it relates to staffing, I did want the board to know that we've determined that we needed to have some additional FTE in our 4th grade to reduce the class size. There, we had increased that by a half FTE teacher, and in analyzing that, we strongly felt we needed to make that full-time teacher to bring those class sizes down. And we analyzed our budget, and we are sitting in a better financial position than we had anticipated, and thought that was the right move. So that should you should see that. So I'll close my remarks unless you have any other questions. Thank you.
Questions for Ben? Okay, we'll move on to approve the agenda. Your motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Chad. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Don. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Discuss and act on the previous board meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the previous meetings from the January 18th meeting?
So moved.
Motion made by Deb. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion made by Chad. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Deb. Any discussion?
Yeah, can Ben, can you explain the lacrosse cooperative application? Is this something that's new for us, or?
Yeah, it's an application. It's something that we've run through our activities steering committee, and we've looked at. This was a request that was brought to us some time ago, and we've analyzed that. We have a strong number of students in our high school, and I don't know if it's the middle school too, that have a desire to participate in lacrosse, and we don't have a lacrosse program. And you know, we certainly have co-op with other schools for different activities, but we've always been the host. So this was new territory for us, and I guess in the spirit of offering more opportunities for our students, we felt like it was the right thing to do. We are going to need to take a few things into consideration yet as future steps if this does go through. And that would be, we need to get a policy in place, and we need to draft a policy to bring to our policy committee for review, which has to do with transportation. That was one of the most challenging pieces for us to work through. But we have discussed it with legal that, you know, we would be on solid ground, but we would need to establish a policy that would allow for the families to transport their child from Princeton to the co-op location, which I think is the scenario that
Is that Big Lake?
it's Big Lake,
It's Big
yeah.
Lake is the
And I
worst.
believe, like, for example, Big Lake co-ops with us in hockey
Yeah, and Becker.
and Becker, and I believe that they drive here.
They do.
Okay, so that was our biggest hangup, to be honest, was the liability associated with that. And we would need to get a policy.
Is that fall or
So
something?
then, this is something that I
Lacrosse
think
is
maybe
fun.
probably shouldn't have been on the consent agenda, maybe actual discussion item first, but,
Well, you know, I would say, and I don't know that there's any kind of, I don't know that there's any time sensitive reason why we couldn't take this off. I mean, and that's, we could table it as well and put it on to an additional or a different meeting.
I'm not saying that I'm not for this. I think it's good, but I mean, I would say, do we not need a policy first in place before we go forward with this? That we,
Well, I'm assuming would it be this spring when the season would start, or is it,
Would the
It's a
coach
spring.
be from Big Lake?
It's a spring
so it
sport.
would be this school year?
Yes.
So like, it starts like in March. So
So-
it is kind of time sensitive.
So the coaches would be from Big Lake, not Princeton, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And we have a model at least that Big Lake and Becker use for the transportation to and from for liability purposes. So we have that ready to go. It's really coming down to, yeah, you know, is the board going to support us allowing our kids to continue to participate in?
Would this be a conference sport or independent?
It's, my guess is it would be independent because there aren't
Yeah,
any other.
I was wondering, like St. Michael, I'm sure has lacrosse.
Yeah.
I think
Rogers,
Monticello
Rogers,
does,
Monticello.
Yeah. Becker does,
Buffalo does.
Big Lake already has a team too, so that probably want more numbers, so that's why
What is,
they're interested in co-op.
what is the cost to the district on this? Just busing, or do we have to provide uniform?
What the agreement is, there's zero cost to the district, and it was, you know, basically, we would have the same agreement that we have for hockey, and that our participants would pay, do they pay our fee or their fee for participation?
I don't remember.
Okay,
I know we talked about it. I want to say it's our fee.
yeah, there's no cost to the district for us to do this, other than allowing our participants or our students to participate in this program.
So we'd have a liaison person from this district? Like if there'd be problems, for example, with Princeton kids? going
Well,
on?
generally speaking, it would be our AD working with their
Okay,
AD.
okay.
And I would imagine that that's, you know, I do know for a fact that's how it works now. Is that, you know, if there's any issues related to hockey, with some of the participants from Big Lake or Becker, that, you know, their AD would be working with our AD through that. Yeah, I honestly, I have no problem if the board wants to push this to the next meeting, and I could get additional information for you if you had any. Otherwise, you know, I'm fine with it moving forward as well. I do know that we do need to get a policy in place that references the transportation piece, and we would have our legal help us, you know, write that up. That's the one piece that we know that we need to get in place. And then there would be,
Before the season starts, that policy.
yeah, for those students to start driving. Yep, and then there would be a waiver that those families would have to sign off on it. Because even if we wanted to provide the transportation, we physically do not have bus drivers to do that, and we could never make that commitment. So the only way that this would happen is if the families provided that transportation. And we do have a long-standing past practice of that occurring. It's just always been with other districts coming to us.
Well,
So it
I-
sounds like we're kind of in the ball as far as like, the best of it has to be ready by March, right?
It does, but at the same time, we can't approve it because, or if we approve it, we gotta have a stipulation that the transportation policy has to be in place before going forward. Because if we just approve it, then it's a go without that stipulation.
Yeah, right.
So you gotta somehow have that built into the motion if it does go forward. I would think.
So when moving forward with
think
the
we can just
contingency,
approve
that
the
the policy
co-op.
be in place.
Mhm.
That's what's on the agenda.
There's approval of
It's just
co-op.
approval of the
Right.
co-op with Big
Yeah.
Lake. And then we take the next step with the policy. I don't know that we have to connect the two.
It's up to the board. I feel like, honestly, I'm gonna tell you exactly how I feel. I feel like maybe we should just table it and bring it back the next meeting with the additional information. But, you know, we would have to vote on it in, what is that, February 15th?
15.
Yeah, because there's no later than 30 days prior to the first day of practice. This has to be approved. So when's the first day of practice?
Well, I think they start the end of February or March.
I guess I say that if I sense that there's, I guess, lots of questions from the board, if you have those, then I would need to have additional time to get you the answers for that. If you're comfortable with moving forward, just knowing that those answers we will get you those answers, then I would say maybe move it forward. But,
Well, I'm good with what I heard tonight, so
okay,
I'm fine. Anyone else?
I'm fine as well.
I'm good.
No objection.
More to
but,
use the
but
best.
point taken, though, Eric, though, when I am reflecting on this, I probably should have put this on not on the consent agenda, because it, you know, should have anticipated some discussion on this topic.
Season, and the season does start April 4th.
Oh, April.
April 4th, yeah. So we've got a little time to get all
And
this.
just so the group knows, you know, we did start this activities steering committee a couple of years ago with board representation on that. And we've talked about this now, you know, kicked it around for about, I don't know, over a year for sure. I know it started last year. And, you know, honestly, there's a lot of questions we needed to get answered before we felt comfortable bringing this forward, so.
All right, we have a motion and a second on approving the consent agenda. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consent agenda is approved. In number 9 of information and the revised budget is first Michelle.
Yeah, if you pull up the first document, this was the overall revised budget for 22. It's hard to imagine we're already in February, but here we are. I'm not going to talk about the general fund line, but I will just do a synopsis of food service and community ed here. Food service is looking really good. Our fund balance as we ended the year was 1.3 in 21. And currently our revenues seem to be outpacing what our expenditures are. So that is in a positive light with the caveat of that there are rules about how much money we can have in fund balance for food service. So I already have the letter from the state of Minnesota stating that. So we will most likely be spending some of this money on equipment in the next year or so. Well, as it's available, as the equipment's available, because we were gonna buy some stuff last year and that didn't happen. Yeah. Okay, community ed is also doing very well. We are in a positive situation there with slightly outpacing the expenditures on our first look here at mid-year. So I am getting more and more confident that we will be able to do a chargeback for a custodial position from Fund 1 into Fund 4. So they seem to be pulling forward. The building fund, this is the LTFM bond that we sold. That's the fund balance at the end of last year. And because if you recall, we had the middle school windows that we needed to deal with. That ended up to be a minor fix in the scheme of things. Cost us less than $20,000 to do, and we had set aside a good chunk of money for that because we didn't know what we were dealing with. So with that, we moved, the proposal is to move our fund, the boiler project from the intermediate into Fund 6. So you'll see a change in LTFM Fund 1. And then there'll be money left over to deal with the sidewalk situation over here and the drainage that we've been waiting to get fixed through this whole thing. And then, of course, debt service is, revenues coming in and our payments going out. Any questions on the smaller funds? And if you bring up the second one, this is Fund 1 broken out into the different areas. So everybody got the numbers big enough to see, because that's what I was doing. All right, I'm just gonna walk through and give a synopsis of each. The next time it comes to the board, we'll have all the printed documents. You can read at your leisure that says what's kind of happened in each area. LTFM, as I just mentioned, we moved the boiler project over to Fund 6. So that's gonna give us a positive variance for 22 of about $200,000 there. Because that project it was a good chunk of change. Operating capital has changed. The expenditures are slightly more. For those that were on finance, you know that we are talking about Palmer is going to a new transportation software for routing, and it also includes parent communication. So, or they've asked us to move to what we call, the name of it's TransFinder. And that software in total with startup fees for the first year is like $78,000. About half of it's startup fees, and then the other half is your ongoing costs, which is similar to what we're paying for Skyward and those big platforms that we use for education. So I added the startup costs to this side 22 budget instead of trying to do it all in 23, because we want to work on getting all of TransFinder, the information from VersaTrans over into TransFinder starting in March. We're gonna need some lead time, so that will be happening. The other thing that happened is the vans that we purchased in 21 did not arrive until 22 school year. So those had to be added in this year, and of course, because we didn't spend it last year, it rolled in the fund balance. We also had 2 pieces of equipment go down in buildings and grounds, which is actually kind of rare to have 2 pieces go. Typically we have 1, but we had 2 this year. Keith got a grant. One was a scissor slip, so he got a grant to cover half of it. And the other one was a burnish or scrubber type thing. And those pieces of equipment are not cheap. So we didn't have enough to cover, so I had to add about $10,000 for that area to the budget for capital. Staff development is relatively the same. We did have some changes in staffing costs because we moved one of the language arts coaches to Title II. They would no longer use that for class size reduction. So that changed us a little bit in staff development, so we're in a positive right now, look there. Q comp, we did not change. Technology assigned, the only thing that changed there is that the revenue for this year right now is 26,000. Program initiatives has not changed. Of course, activity account has not changed. Fund 19 that we have been giving you updates about what we're spending it on. The total for this year right now is 1.2 million, a little over. And that is including multiple pots of COVID funding. So, but the large part of this is ESSER 2. The good news is we won't be spending all of ESSER 2 in this year, so that can help us out in 23 next year. That brings us to the unassigned category. We've updated, gone through line by line, and we'll keep monitoring to the end of the year. But as I told you last meeting, we have 3,118 kids in for revenue. And special education had not been updated. The report was updated this morning. There is a little bit more sped money that can be added. Those are the two biggest pieces. It's not significant. And then we've gone through, we've updated all the salaries, we've reviewed all of the sub costs. You know, Jason keeps telling me, Michelle, sub costs are going to be through the roof. And so far, I don't see it as totally out of line yet, but we're just getting into the part where we're gonna, you know, typically this is where we see, so this is where the monitoring comes in. You know, hopefully it doesn't go crazy, but you never know. So our variance at original budget was a negative 1.9 million. Right now, we are looking at 1.1 million. So we are a little over what I typically like to see at revised budget, but we are much better off than where we are. And we have a good chunk of COVID money for next year and some for the following year that we will be leveraging. So any questions on the revised? Remember, we're always budgeting, hopefully worst case scenario, but of course that's based on history. Don't have anything, we can move on to the next thing.
Any other questions, or we can move on to parameters?
But while she's pulling that up, you know, I just, on the parameters, I don't think we need to spend any time on the state. We know that we're getting 2%. Unless there's a major change in the board's philosophy, I don't think, I wouldn't advise that we mess with the class size guidelines. I think the enrollment will have to settle on what our projections will be, and we have some veteran board members, you know, that will run several simulations using lots of data, and we'll have to come up with the number that we feel is our best guess to start the budget planning.
So, and that's on the multi-year analysis, what Ben's mentioning here. We have option 1, option 2, and option 3. As I said last time, I think we can take option 3 totally off the table. Option 1, there's two option 1s with K at 214, K at 200. I did run 2 analysis financially using 3,090 and 3,070. So that's where I want us to jump, because that might help you, because we're hoping to have this voted on next meeting. We're a little off on our timing of meetings, but I think that's okay.
So you're hoping that the board will vote on the class size, or not the class size, the enrollment numbers.
The enrollment, and yes, and set the class size guidelines. Yeah. So parameters and the revised will be voted on next time. All right, if you bring up the first analysis, it should say enrollment 3,090, K-12 in the top. So the first thing I want to preface this conversation with is that we have one-time money. That one-time money has 1.2 million in it. That 1.2 million has a lot of staffing in it. In fact, it's predominantly staffing. So even though the analysis for the unassigned for this year is going to be okay, in my opinion, we are going to have to start addressing the one-time again, because that's going to come off the table the following year completely. So the first box, I show the fund balances on the left side of the page, where we were in 2019, where we are right now, and where we ended in 21. Which our fund balance is stable, it's good. We've got about 13% of our overall expenses, so we're above our 10% by policy. The first box on here is just the original budget, and that's just to remind us where we were when we started the original, we have now revised it. And we look at 3 scenarios, 100%. What happens if we're at 99% of the budget or 98? And you can see the fund balances. We dropped 1.1. If everything came true to the way that you budget, you'd be at 4.3. We would still be well above the 3.5 at that point. If we're at 99, that fund balance is at 4.6. If we are at 98%, we're at 5, just over 5 million. So in any of the scenarios this year, unless there's a huge hiccup that would put us at 101% of the budget, we're very stable. We're not going to get to that 3.5 million. Then we run those fund balances to the next column, or the next box, and we run through what might happen. So this enrollment loss of 28 is taken in consideration a total enrollment for K-12 of 3,090. And this is also including the little bump up you get because of declining enrollment. 2% state, and that'll be roughly the same on both of them because there's not a big enough change, and I just use a rounded number. We typically see an increase in special education. A lot of that has to do with the fact that our salaries go up. So we're going to get 58% of the salaries. So we can count on some kind of money there. The good news is compensatory / basic skills, as I call it, did not go down this year. It's up slightly, which is good news. It's much nicer to put in 55 positive than 55 negative. So that's good. Then you got to look at your expenses. Well, we know we've settled contracts, so we've got about 1.3 million. If we leave all of our staffing the same, everything turns out relatively the same, we'd be looking at an additional 1.3 to deal with increases in staff costs. And then there's other costs. We're going to have a contract change with transportation as one of those costs. But there's also other things. But as we build the budget for next year, we'll find things that also will come off the table. So you look at the variances, and if everything came true to form in both years, reductions to maintain that 3.5 million would be about 1.3 or 1.4 actually. At 99%, we'd be at 662,000. And at 98%, we wouldn't really need to do much of anything. I wouldn't suggest we do nothing, but I don't think we need to cut 1.4 million.
Michelle,
We have a lot of COVID.
when's the last time we've spent 100% of our budget?
In my time frame here, the highest we've gotten is 99% in Yanson.
I think that's important for the board to have as a perspective when you're
Yeah.
making these decisions.
Okay, and then if you move to the 3,070. The left side of the sheet is basically the same. The change here, of course, is the enrollment loss of 48 kids. And so reductions to maintain 10% on 100%, well, up to 1.5. And at 98, it's showing that we would need to at least reduce $57,000 on a high level view. Remember, this is all a high level view. And that's to maintain our fund balance at 3.5 million. I did ask Emily what we had for kindergarten last year in our census. She told me 310 kids were in our kindergarten census last year, so we brought in 72% of that. So we're at 260 for the census this year. And currently, Gwen told us we have 50% of them in preschool, and that's about 120 kids. So if you double that, we're pretty close on what the census is. So K is basically our decision point in my mind,
The wild card.
the wild card.
And I want to remind the board that we do not make our final vote to accept next year's budget until the
June meeting.
the June meeting, right? So, what we're asking to be voted on is the parameters in which we would use, knowing that, between March and June, a lot of things probably will happen. And, when we get additional information, then we would bring that forward and say, we recommend that we adjust some of this. And it might be some small adjustments along the way. One easy example, as we monitor student enrollment, right, that can change. And then also, we don't know what's going to happen at the Capitol this year. There could be some favorable things. Who knows? But there is a chance of that, and if that were to occur, then I think that it would be in our best interest to consider that in our budget.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. And remember, we will have COVID-19 funds that we will still be leveraging, and we only have those for the next couple of years, and they must be spent. So we're gonna leverage that. We're gonna keep teachers in our classrooms. That's what it's for.
Okay, any other questions for Michelle? I just wanted, at the C meeting, the superintendent from St. Michael Albert spoke when Representative Dabney spoke. And she said that their primary class size numbers are 37. And their secondary class size numbers are 40, in the 40s.
Primary is 37.
Primary is 37.
That's the
And
average.
their secondary is in the 40s. And so I'm always yipping about class size around this table, but then I was like, oh, okay, I guess we are doing so bad. I don't know. I think that was on the heels. It was completely hard, but I think that was on the heels of that they had cut 6 million.
Oh, yeah, and my job, I mean, I know she's told me that before too, and it's just even hard to believe. And if you recall, they had an operating referendum on the ballot in November and it failed. So they're probably gonna have to make additional reductions.
So I feel blessed that we are, that is just incredible. That is a lot of kids in a primary classroom, but 40 kids in high school classrooms, tough too.
Well, that's done.
Yeah, so,
And just the emotional exhaustion that occurs in a district when you are cutting dozens and dozens of people that you work with and have emotional ties to, it's just devastating.
Yeah.
So, that's why we work really hard to make these small adjustments every year to try and stay within our parameters, because that allows us to be healthy. So hopefully the plan is that we don't have to go through the huge jumps, but we're also very, very nervous that once the stimulus dollars kind of run out, and we've been leveraging that the last few years, it's this whole cliff that you don't want to fall off of.
okay, we'll move on then to update on the land sale, and that would be Ben.
Yeah, I kind of referenced that. We're basically, we have a tentative agreement on price, and we are, working to get the contract put together on that. And really, it's just a matter of getting the lines and the legal descriptions put together for that to occur. They've had some, I have given them permission to do just some pretty informal surveying out on that property. Because there is some information that they need to have. I have received one call from a neighbor in that area and explained that to that person, and I think we should be good. But once we get the contract put together more, then I'll send that to the board for your review, and then you can ask any questions that you have.
Is that where that well is? That we were dealing with a couple years ago?
Yeah, the well is on the middle school property. Yep.
Not on the one that's the.
No, it's where our ball fields are. Yep. Yep.
So it'll stay on that property.
Yep, that
Yep.
stays with us.
Unfortunately.
All right, any other questions for Ben? 9D is the 22-23 calendar. And
Yeah, I'll just speak to that. This is about as traditional of a calendar as you'll see. It really follows the past practice of probably many, many years in our school district, is how things land with the dates. It's pretty boilerplate. I guess we've determined that our residents prefer to get out of school either that last week in May or the first week in June, and not go into mid-June. Therefore, we don't have the discretion to have a spring break. If the board ever wanted to entertain something like that, that would modify this. But our recommendation to the board is to stay with the status quo, if you will, and just move forward with this traditional calendar. It has the appropriate number of days and student contact days and staff development days. once this is adopted, we will have some ability for sites to have some site-based decision-making on. I think we do have some of the conferences are all on there, but there might be, some modifications within that, so.
This is just for information, right?
Just information, I guess what I would ask is, look at it. If you got any major questions or concerns, just give me a call or email and we can change it.
And it was run through sites, leadership teams as well. So teaching staff had an opportunity to share some thoughts they had, administration, so it's been vetted at least.
All right, well, there's no additions to the agenda. The future meetings are listed here. And I will take a motion to adjourn. So motion made by Deb, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Chad, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, we are adjourned.